All right, sorry.
The things that we've learned over the years, it matters. And so it's so very important. And we can make this transition. So I feel, I'm just excited because, I get a chance to see both sides of it. And that transition was, it was smooth for me, but there was some doubt, right? And I think the greatest doubt was their mission, the purpose of why we were doing what we're doing. So, yeah, I'm really excited. Great transition for me.
So too, the hardest month for me when I got out a long time ago, but I've talked with other veterans too, is just that there's a really abrupt kind of stopping point. So you get when you join the military, you get OCS for officers, ROTC, ROTC cadet in the audience. You get ROTC, you get basic training. So you get kind of, and it's not the nicest introduction to the military in the world, but it is an introduction, right? And so we get 6 weeks of prepping and trying to get to the military and telling what the military is like and kind of getting you out of the civilian mentality to your military mentality. And what we have is when you get released from the military, it really is, at least on the enlisted side, it's kind of a pack your bags, get your stuff. When the gate closes behind you, both physically and metaphorically, the gate closes, and you are no longer in the military.
Yeah, that is true. I remember going through tax, right, the transition assistance program, and wondering, oh my God, what's on the other side?
Yeah.
Will I be able to do the things that I was able to do in the military? And another aspect is, you depending on how much time you spend, you work really hard to get promoted. You work really hard to be in a leadership position, but when you're making that transition into civilian life, you don't start at that level in most cases. You have to start all over again.
Yep.
And sometimes that can be challenging, so.
I mean, you lead people when
you do.
like, by the time you get out, you have, a lot of folks have like E5 or above, and you get to actually, lead people while you're there and be in charge of equipment, be in charge of missions.
Yeah.
And, I remember getting out, and one of the stories I have was I worked at a pizza place in the summer before I went to college. So I had this transition period, got out in April, and I was going to college. I knew I was accepted to IU, Indiana University, in the fall. So it was my dream school. It was where I wanted to go. I looked out on the balcony of our dorm in the Air Force. I picked out location, just classic military. I'd like compassed it out to like degrees, like, okay, IU is straight that way, right? And every day, like every night, I would get out on the balcony and kind of look and going, like, it's one day closer to when I'm there. But when I got out, it was just this weird kind of loss of purpose. I mean, I felt this really kind of loss of identity and loss of purpose. I really missed my NCO stripes on my arms, and I really missed being able to kind of rely on that sense of mission, that I'm serving others, kind of the service above self kind of thing. And I was working at a pizza place, and they were all they were really concerned. They had just bought like this new pizza oven. And they were like so proud of this oven, right? And so the manager comes over and goes, look at this. This cost us like, $150,000, right? He says this number like I'm supposed to be impressed. And I kind of laughed, and he was really upset that I was chuckling over this. I was like, I am so sorry. I know this means a lot to you, but you have to understand, I just got done working on like, $1 billion aircraft. And I have seen like $1 million literally go up in smoke. I mean, I've seen somebody screw something up where it's just like poof, and it's all done, and it's $1 million. And so I said, I'm sure this means a lot to you, but it's kind of this weird reset for me of what matters in the civilian world doesn't really, isn't as consequential in a way. And so it was a really weird kind of time of just resetting myself to get to where, even though I knew, and I had everything going for me. I mean, I was going to go to school. I had everything mapped out the way I wanted to be. But literally, that first few months, I think it was the low point in my life. Like it was really the lowest. I mean, I've suffered the death of my parents and everything else. And I really have never felt that kind of deep, that well of despair that was just deep. And I had no idea why.
Yeah.
Like until I started doing this and I kind of figured out like this, the reasons why. But while I was in it, I couldn't figure out like why you feeling so, whoa.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I remember a colleague of mine, I took over a program and I remember the lady asked me, she said, are you able to manage our budget? And I almost laughed. I'm like, I'm used to managing budgets in the military, right? So she said, we gotta make sure that, you understand how to manage your budget. I said, well, I'm probably used to managing budget value more than what this is with equipment and personnel and those type of things. But one of my greatest things that I found challenging is, military is about leadership, right? And they teach you early how to supervise, right? It's not only your leadership course, but it's really you apply it, right? What I find is most people that haven't served have never done any supervisory course, right? And so that was a challenge for me is, most civilians, they're supervising because of position, not because of any, we've gone through, so you go through the Air Force about 4-5 leadership courses, 6 weeks at a time, right? And that was one of the things that I had, that was a balance for me, right? When we talk about leadership and structure, you want to make sure, we're used to that command and control, and accountability.
Maurice, let me play off that if you get Pete on. I certainly empathize with what Phil said. That first year out of the Army was we were under a lot of stress, taking very heavy casualties in Vietnam, but I determined that I was not going to be one of these guys who came out of the service and got drunk for 6 months. So I had a job within 3 days of being out of the service. It was a crappy job. Michigan was in a downturn, and I came home to Ann Arbor because I had a network there. And the only job I could find was proofreading in a large publishing firm. I'm going to tell you that story in a minute, but just to let you know where I'm going to go in the end, I'm going to have some very practical advice about how you deal with applications to departments, human relations departments, that have no idea what your military service means. They don't know what your skills mean. They don't have comparable language, and how you deal with that, and how you deal with the entirely different experience you will find particularly in corporations. So anyway, just to quickly go with my story, I took that proofreading job. I sat there reading computer names against numbers for about an hour, and I realized I couldn't do it. I was just too jacked up. So I got up and started wandering around this enormous plant, employed, 1,000 people or more, and started interviewing people. And ultimately, I ended up in the vault where all of the company's products were kept, and found there was a woman there. The entire inventory of the company's products was in her head. There was no catalog. She was retiring in a week, and no one was going to brief her. The entire knowledge of the company's products was going to walk out the door. So I walked without an appointment into the executive vice president of marketing and laid this on his desk. Well, the next day, basically the day that the human resources department issued a memo announcing my firing because I'd not been on the job, they received the memo advising them that I was now the assistant advertising manager of the company. And it went from there. Once you've been an infantryman in Vietnam, what the hell do you have to be scared of, right? And my practical advice here, I'm not going to give it all at once because these guys need to talk as well. They have very valuable experience. But my practical advice is, if you are passive, too passive in your job, they will not give you raises. They will not properly promote you, and you stand a high risk of being laid off. And the only way to really get advancement is to jump companies. I'm talking corporations now, not the university. The only way to get an advancement is to jump companies, but you don't know what you're jumping into. So you need some skills there that I'm going to outline today, but I'll do a couple right now. The first is people will want you to write a resume. Your resume looks like everybody else's resume. I don't care what your resume is. It looks like everybody else's resume. There is a stack of resumes. So if you if you write a resume for a company, research the hell out of that company and make your resume look like you were born to work there. So every resume is custom written for your application to that specific company. And you need to do that. Secondly, HR is not your friend. They typically look at resumes as for an excuse not to hire you. I'm going down here not to find out how you can benefit us. I'm finding out how I'm going to tell you no. So you need to get beyond HR. You need to find a way to talk to more senior management who will be informed that you are now working for the company and they need to process your social security number and other details and get this going because you've just been hired today. That would be my overall practical advice. And then be brave. Look at opportunities. I left this first job after about 6 months, and I took over as the editor of a broken down weekly shopping newspaper. And I did this instead of taking a job with the Wall Street Journal in Chicago, where I had an offer, because I would be in charge. I'd not be working for anybody. I would be the boss. And if I could turn this thing around, it would be a hell of a statement for future employment. And so I did turn it around within a year and lectured at the University of Michigan Department of Journalism as to how I did it. But how I did it was my way. And I can get into some details later on. I don't mean to hog this thing, but it is not a paved road. The military really, I think, took good care of you, at least I hope they did. They took care of you, they trained you, it was clear what the mission was, and you got promoted as you deserved it. Civilian life won't do that. You have to make your own way, and that's my overall message this morning. Gentlemen?
Yeah, I think it's the preparation, right? It's all really about the preparation, and I like the point that you can't be passive. You really have to go after it. I remember having to do it myself, and now I help young people write resumes and help them find jobs. And like you said, that resume should speak to what you want to do. But I would also add that if you're still serving, or you know someone that's serving, advice is don't wait until it's time to make the transition. Start making that transition, those plans early, right? Seeing what's out there in the industry. I spent 27 years when I joined the military, the world was different, right? Jobs were different, opportunities were different. So, but then there, you got to stay abreast of what's happening.
I just asked him what his password is.
Yeah. Any questions?
No, it's a pass. Like, you know, pass. It's pass.
Do you have a password? He was trying to sign on, but he doesn't have a password. All right, I'll take it from there. So in this first job as editor, my first problem was that I had a boss, the publisher of the paper, who was a sociopath. He would take his people, everybody in the company, and he would manipulate them to oppose one another and create problems that only he could solve. In this way, he felt he was being assured of his job security, while the rest of us were being driven crazy. Now, in general, people are afraid of vets, and particularly back in Vietnam, combat vets scared the hell out of people. And I was trying to figure out how to deal with this guy. So I finally went into his office one day in just a friendly way and told him about my combat experiences in Vietnam, which I tell him one way are really bloody. And then I just said, hey, well, it's great to talk to you. Have a nice day. And the next day we came into a big meeting. He started doing his sociopath thing. And I had a large styrofoam cup of coffee in my hand full. And as he was talking, I just, with a passive expression on my face, I just squeezed that cup and the hot coffee ran over my hand. And I was acting, by the way. This was not me being mad. It was purely acting. Hot coffee running over my hand. And he started studying. Well, of course, there are other ways to do this. Clearly, Lori has some good ideas. Let's hear what Lori has to say. And after that, that man was not a problem because he thought I was going to kill him. And I wasn't. I was acting. But every now and then, it's good to use your military that way. You will find that not everybody in corporations not everybody's angelic. Not everybody has a clean heart. There's a certain amount of evil. So
So I'm asking you this question. I've heard this before. I have not experienced it. There are people that have not served who believe that there's hesitancy to put forward or vets in leadership positions because they believe or have said that we don't think outside the box, right?
Mhm.
We're used to following orders. Have you ever experienced that or heard that?
Oh, yeah.
You
All
know,
the
I mean,
time.
it's so not true, but we don't think outside the box, innovative because we're used to following, directives and guidance. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to jump in on that one because I just say quickly, we are taught to adapt, improvise, and overcome. You have problems in this company that you're not getting solved. I can solve them. Just give me an assignment.
And with limited resources
Yes.
too. I mean, I think that's the other,
More or less.
well, Champ chimed in right away. I mean, it's really is, I've had bosses, talk to about that I'm frugal, but I get things done. And that's because of that training too, is that we don't always have, despite what the defense budget looks like, right? Like we don't have unlimited budgets. And sometimes you make do. I mean, there's a famous thing about the World War II vets had were landed in Normandy, were trudging through the countryside and came upon hedgerows. Right? Have you heard about this? So they came upon these big hedgerows of basically trees and hedges and everything up that blocked the road. I mean, they basically lined the roads with this, and they couldn't get through. They couldn't get the tanks through. And so what the infantrymen and the tankers actually did was they welded a big fork onto the front of Sherman tanks to basically mow down the hedgerows. So if you see if you go back and look at some of like hedgerows and Sherman tanks, you'll see these big kind of monstrosities that were used basically to push down the hedges so the tanks could get through. That was pure innovation. That wasn't designed for that tank. Nobody in Washington came up with that. That were people on the ground who actually worked on the tanks.
It was actually two giant cattle horns, and it was designed or devised by a cab driver from Brooklyn. And the Army, to its credit in those days, allowed this idea to bubble up from the bottom. And within a couple of days, every tank had it, and we just plowed through those hedgerows. Whereas today, if you go into corporations, you'll find they say they like bubble up, but they actually are very top down. And getting a good idea, there's probably nothing harder than getting a really good idea adopted by the organization. Which is where I think you with military training have an advantage. Again, what are they going to do? Make you an infantryman, send you to Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever it is? I mean, these people are a fear-driven, risk-averse company, and you may find you were the only person who was not afraid. And that's the way I operated.
It's very valuable.
Yeah.
Crisis-wise is another thing. And again, if anybody's listening, if you have questions, please let me know. The question stuff is up and down below. You can type in your questions. We will answer them here. One of the things I have found going through just my job is crisis management of that there is, I've had people kind of in even life and death situations kind of run around with their hair on fire, kind of not knowing what to do. And I think military training wise, it's kind of a cool head. You solve the problem. So if you have a problem with something, instead of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And, there's a committee and everybody's kind of doing the same thing. And it's this big crisis. If you served, you've dealt with life and death crisis, whether it's crisis on like, I need to make sure the aircraft's fixed right because the pilot's depending on my life. I need to make sure the parachute's packaged right because the paratrooper is depending on my life. I got to make sure I know fire control and emergency operations because the ship may actually depend on what I do in an emergency. We're trained in those kind of like when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, right? We're trained to keep calm and work the problem because we know when that kind of crisis happens, the worst thing you can do is just panic because then everybody dies, right? And so when you bring that into kind of a corporate world, a corporate setting, or even civilian setting, it's very useful because there are a lot of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And you're like, okay, we can fix this. Like, step one. And then you can start, you do the military given directions, like I need you to do this. I need you to do this. I need you to do this. We'll do this. We'll take care of it. It's good to have somebody taking charge under fire. Even civilian under fire. Because we know somewhere in the back of our heads, we're like, okay, this is a PR problem, or we got to get a product out on time problem, or this is a student, for our work, the students having some difficulty problem. But by and large, a lot of these things are not life and death kind of catastrophic situations that we've all been trained to deal with. So again, like Lori said, we're used to dealing with the bar up here. When in the civilian world, the bar is down here. And we're like, oh yeah, we can do that. We can take care of this. Boom, boom, boom.
Give you an idea of the power you have as a veteran.
There we go.
One of the experiences I found working for the 4 largest advertising agencies in the world, where I eventually ended up, in Detroit, which was the 3rd largest ad market in the world, people would get fired for no good reason. They hadn't done anything wrong, and they would be dismissed. And I would march into the chairman's office or the president's office, and I would say, Bill is not fired. No, we just fired. No, he is not fired. He didn't do anything wrong. I am reversing the fireman. I'm reversing his firing. Do you understand? I've done that. I can't tell you how many times, and it has always prevailed. People get fired. I rehire them on the spot in the president's office. It sticks. I will not put up with injustice. You've got a legitimate reason for that. That's fine. Now, if I can pontificate a little bit longer, let's talk about firings. Firing, I regard as a great opportunity for a couple of reasons. One, the best firms in this country, Silicon Valley, for example, will ask you if you've ever been fired, and if you haven't, your stock goes down in their eyes. You're more valuable if you've been fired. If you've not been fired, they think you're not trying. That's true. They think you're not trying. Secondly, because you're not going to get any kind of a significant raise, your raise will lag behind the inflation rate. Getting fired is an opportunity to pick up $10,000. You go to your next job interview, you're upbeat about yourself, you stay positive. Even if you're acting, that's okay. Be acting, act positive. They'll offer you a job. You say, I'll take it, but I'll need $10,000 more. And they'll say, fine. And now you've just gotten that $10,000 raise for having been fired. Can't tell you how many times I've done that. And how many times I've advised people to do that, and it's worked. So be brave, be bold, be honest, do the right thing. And my last little piece of advice is, where possible, develop products. Develop products that go plop on somebody's desk when you're in a job interview. I, for example, was working for the largest agency in the world. I was in Detroit, they were in New York, and they were sending us copy that wasn't very good. This was a problem because I was in my client's building. And my client would come down at 5 o'clock at night and say, this is garbage, it's got to be on tomorrow morning, fix it. Well, I knew I'd get fired if I fixed it, but I fixed it. And it would be on and they would love it. So they fired me. And I went to my next prospective job almost immediately. In the interview, I was asked, why did you leave Saatchi & Saatchi? I said, well, I was fired. And the guy started to look really uncomfortable. And I said, but before I left, I did this plop and this plop and did this plop. He goes, Jesus, you did this? And I was hired on the spot at the largest account in the world. It was today it's over $1 billion account. And it's because I had products that I could show. So think about how that works. How can you develop a product that will go plop? It could be a memo, it could be a report. It's great if it's a book. Write a book. Doesn't matter if anybody buys it. Doesn't matter if anybody reads it. You've got a book. Plop. Do it. This is serious. I've been a business consultant for 30 years. This is what works.
So Lori, we had a question online. So Dr. Susan Montgomery wrote, we don't want to ask vets about their experiences to respect their privacy, but we want to know how best to help them. Besides, how can I support you What kinds of questions do you suggest we ask to help us better understand how we can support veterans?
Well, I have almost, I wish he was here because I would ask, we're talking in the context of getting a job, of finding work, or we're talking about personal support, and helping them address their personal emotional issues.
I think context is school-wise. Like if a veteran comes to class, how do we ask? I think there's a whole thing of, oh, there we go. Academic advising and support. Thank you, Susan. I think we have a tendency, like civilian world is just kind of like the thank you for your service, which is easy to do. But then the squishiness of getting more in depth, like how much, what they're not, when we think of, I'll put it in context. I'm still amazed that 90% of the American population has never went to basic training. Like that just still astounds me that such a fundamental part of my existence is 6 weeks of my life that I can still remember in very vivid detail, a good majority of that, where I can't remember what I ate for lunch yesterday. That most people have never gone through that. Similar with OCS, right? Which is a hell of a lot harder mentally. That most people don't have that common kind of experience to kind of draw from. And so they don't know what questions to ask, right? You don't know what kind of questions to ask.
I'd like to jump in and say veterans are typically very uneasy about sharing their experience with civilians. I have stories that do not freak out other veterans at all. They sit there, nod, smile,
Laugh.
and laugh, offer me comparable stories. If I tell these stories to civilians, their hair catches fire. It's just what I was put through. It's not that I'm a bad guy. I got sent to a war, and I got it, and it was a bloody war.
What are some good civilian questions they can ask that doesn't delve into those things, but still show that they care and offer support?
I find that, getting people to feel that they're at ease, they're respected. Respect is a big thing, and getting them to talk really goes a long way. Let me give you an extreme example from a job. I was working as a creative director. Now I'm on the largest advertising account in the world. And I get a new art director. I mean, it's not exactly new. He's sort of in his 30s. But he has a particularly military bearing. So I take him to lunch. His name was Ken. And I said, hey, Ken, I was in Vietnam. I saw this and this. And you've got a military bearing. I'm pretty sure you were in Vietnam. He says, I was. I was a captain. I did 2.5 tours. 2.5 is kind of unusual. How did that come to pass? He said, well, at the end of the second tour, I was highly decorated, and I really had understood how to manage my men and not only be an effective fighting force, but also get them to survive, get them not to get killed out there. And I felt very strongly about that. So I was halfway through my third tour as a captain, and I took an R&R. And while I was gone, the word came down to me that my entire unit had been wiped out. So I jumped in a C-130 transport plane and I flew back immediately. And I found that a colonel, lieutenant colonel, who had a desk job in Washington, had come in and taken charge of my unit and in a clumsy way took them out into the field in combat and got them all killed. And he said, your guys don't know how to fight Charlie, but I'm here now to teach them how to fight Charlie. And Ken told me I took 3 steps back with the full automatic and put 18 rounds into that colonel's chest. The Army did not want me court-martialed or prosecuted because of the incredible number of decorations I had, 4 or 5 rows. They simply had me out of the Army the next day. And I went into several years of therapy, and I went to art school, and now I'm an art director. And I extended my hand and I said, welcome home, Ken. You're a valued member of my team. And he was a great art director, and we worked closely together. I respected him. And, I just talked to him. His case, whatever you may personally think of it, his case had been adjudicated by the Army. He'd had his therapy. He had real skills. He was a wonderful guy, and actually was a very gentle man. So respect them, see if they'll talk to you, and see, why the content of the work is not engaging to them here. why they are not interacting with it in a way that engages. Because if you've been through the adrenaline rush of the military, civilian life, academic life is boring. And, you know, you have to really get into the intellectual side of your brain to get stimulated. And that's where these guys need to transition to.
I agree.
I work with some students, some veteran students in a classroom, and their challenge was the professor or instructor never asked them what were their experiences like. For example, I had a person in the military who was in logistics, supply chain management, and this individual wanted to get a supply chain management degree at the university. Well, of course, they had been working in supply chain, so they kind of knew, you know, how it works and that. But when he tried to, you know, raise his hand and say, you know, what's being taught is not really what's going on, then it became this struggle in the classroom, right? So he felt like he was, the teacher felt like he was a disruptor to the class, right? And all he was trying to share was his experience. You know, I worked in this industry, you know, in this field in the military for years. But then what's being taught in the classroom is not necessarily true, right? We understand this is academia. So I would say, what could someone want to ask someone in the military? Ask them about their experience. You know, allow that experience to be relative to what it is you're doing. You know, ask them about their leadership. You know, if there's anyone that there's some groups or, you know, do you want to organize, you know, find those people in the military who have those experiences, utilize the experiences of people who have been in the military, right? Because probably most of the time that they've been a part of that.
Yeah.
I would
In
say-
fact, Doctor, if you're still on, I've got one that might be very applicable to you. In one of our panels about 3 years ago, I brought in a retired sergeant major from the Army who had gotten a job in a local hospital as a physician's assistant. And he, in turn, was performing things in the emergency room the doctors had never seen before. And they went, my God, man, how did you do that? He was saving lives of people they would have lost because he had done this under combat, under fire. And you put your knee here, you put your elbow here, you put your 2 fingers here, and you know, and the guy stops bleeding, and you make it. And he's still down there now, but they're much more valued and esteemed physician's assistant because they listen to him. You learn things in combat about medical emergency services that it would be very difficult to learn in civilian life. And I respect any ER, by the way, and any ER doctor, but it's just the truth.
I think that in that is just being listened to.
Mhm.
I think I think anybody personally, you know, anybody respects that. I think sometimes the civilian approach to talking with military is somewhat akin to asking somebody who's like spouse or partner or child has passed away, right? You don't know what to say. You don't. I mean, you're kind of like, how gingerly should I step here, right? But the best thing to do I've ever heard of anybody say is just express care and concern. You don't have to empathize to the point of like, oh, you know, oh, I've been through that too, because like any kind of trauma or any kind of thing that's happened, you haven't, because you haven't shared their personal story. That's their own. But just saying, hey, I'm here for you. I care about you. And ask questions. I wouldn't even worry about asking the wrong questions. I would just say, I mean, other than, you know, I think the only one that's kind of offline is, have you killed anybody? I think anybody else, you know, don't ask that question. But a lot of other things you can ask, because we've been asked before. And I have some great, you know, my personal stories. I have some awesome friendships that I got in the military. I saw some really cool stuff that civilians will never, ever, 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 ever see. I've had weapons pointed at me, which was a scary kind of subject, especially for an Air Force guy. I didn't expect that. And, you know, a lot of my service was friendship and work and tediousness and kind of mundane, which is actually the shared thing of a lot of us. So beyond the combat stories that some of us can tell, there's 90% of our story is just, we did this. I worked in the hot summers and cold winters of Arkansas. I mean, in Kansas, sorry. And And that was kind of my experience, but I have some really cool stories in that time that I can share. And so just ask, because I'll know where the line is, because I've seen looks. I've practiced this enough, and most of us who've gotten out, and a lot of students even have talked to their parents and talked to their siblings and talked to their aunts and uncles. And we know somewhat of the line that you don't want to hear about. You don't want to hear about the bloody business of war. You usually don't want to hear about big trauma. And so we won't share that. But we'll share some of our other stories and our other things that they're going through. Just general questions. How you doing? How's your transition back? Have any problems that I can help you out with?
Let me share something that I hope.
I think CARE works.
Let me share something this is very good, Phil. I share something that I hope will be inspirational to you guys who are now active military and looking for your next step or thinking about it when you finish the military. For years, if you saw a homeless person, you thought, oh, a Vietnam vet. And there was some truth to that because 15% of us who came back from Vietnam, I was fortunate not to be one, 15% of 3 million men had their brains so altered by blast injuries or by sheer stress that they could not recover on their own. And so essentially 400,000 people got dumped on civilian life all at once about 1970 with no resources to handle it. But for the rest of us, the 85%, the 2.6 million who came back, we got jobs, we got married, we used our GI benefits to get more education. 10 years after our war, we 85% were making more money than the people who didn't go to war in our generation. We were better educated than the people who didn't go to war in our generation. And we were more successful than the people who didn't go to war in our generation. This stuff that we're talking about today works. You just have to have confidence in it. And those in turn who are interfacing, who are meeting with these veterans, have confidence in them and just work on giving them confidence. I don't know that they so much need to change as institutions and organizations need to realize how you utilize this phenomenal resource. I'll put it to you this way. You get on the Lake Michigan ferry out of Muskegon going to Milwaukee, or you get on the Badger out of Ludington going to Manitowoc. In the middle of the lake, something happens and the boat starts to sink. You better hope to hell there are 20 veterans on that boat, because if there are, you will live. They'll organize in an instant and get everybody off. And if there aren't, you're doomed. And that's just the way it's like that. That's how good we are.
Well, they did Scully from the
Oh, yeah.
from the thing. They asked him how he was able birds take out both of his engines right on takeoff. If you don't know airframes, by the way, if you don't know avionics, the worst times for anything to happen is takeoffs and landings, and by far the worst of those two is takeoffs, because you don't have enough airspeed, you don't have any ways out. Your lift is almost zero at this point. And so he just right off of takeoff, barely enough airspeed to actually clear. He gets bird strikes to take out both engines. And he's basically a glider with no airspeed. And he looks around and figures out, they're trying to direct him back to airports. He has split seconds to make a decision that's going to either doom or save his aircraft. And he chooses the river because it's wide and straight and he can do it. And when they asked him why, like how was he able to make those kind of decisions, he said, because I was a combat pilot. And he would just do boom, boom. He wasn't freaking out. He wasn't, it wasn't panic. It was like, boom, there's a problem. How do I solve? What resource class? It's classic military. Boom, there's a problem. What kind of resources do I have? I have this. I have this airport. How much fuel? What's my airspeed? Nope, not going to make it. What's another resource? I have the river. Going to take the river. And that's those kind of things that I think is really ingrained for a lot of military folks that they can.
Pete, are you on?
We might have Pete Dodge on here, do we?
We're hoping we have Pete Dodge on. Can you hear me, Pete?
No, I don't.
Can you hear me, Pete?
I don't know if we do this.
Pete, can you hear me?
We're running low on time too.
All right, we're running low on time. We'll have to lose this guy who it's too bad.
He'll be back on our Vietnam veterans on Wednesday. right?
No,
He won't? Oh, I thought he was.
no,
Okay.
two other guys, but,
Okay.
we'll have to figure
Maybe
this
we
out.
can,
but,
You can do it.
I could invite him back.
Yes.
Anyway, we have a few minutes left. I love the doctor's question. I hope what I said was not bombastic and was helpful. You do, when you're approaching a veteran who's struggling in the academic setting, you do have to make an assessment as to whether or not this person is so severely injured mentally by their experience. As you may know, the brain actually clinically alters in such a way it's damaged and the individual cannot bring themselves back by themselves. They cannot render their own therapy. They need help. That help is intense. That help is special. And it may not involve academics. It may involve carpentry or learning to sail or hell, learning to play golf. But that is an extreme case. Other people who are just, they miss the adrenaline rush and they cannot crack open the book. They're kind of like me as a proofreader. I would say, if this is the state you're in, don't be going to school now, go out and get some jobs and come back when you feel like you're ready. Because, we will welcome you back. And that might be a great way to go. Not everybody is ready for school. When I got out of the service, I was admitted to the U of M grad school. I was here for 6 weeks in journalism. And they were teaching things I didn't believe in. I had been an Army news correspondent in Vietnam after combat. I had walked the world's press around Vietnam. I had articles published all over the world, and they're teaching stuff I didn't believe in, so I dropped out. And a year later to the day that I dropped out, I was back as a guest lecturer about my newspaper, how I did it. Because I did it, my way. So you think what you will of me. And there are certainly reasons to be critical. I'm just sharing my authentic experience. Any other questions? I really love that doctor's questions.
I think everybody's transition's different. Everybody's transition's unique, just like the individual. Everybody brings their own skill sets both into the military and after the military. But helping them to kind of, I think, as a future officer, kind of helping your enlisted folks know that there is a transition coming, and that they think it's going to be smooth. It probably isn't. It's a big jump, and for all the veterans I know, it takes a lifetime kind of not just unlearning, because I think that's a bad term. It takes a lifetime of integrating this stuff back into who you are, of accepting some of these things of who you are. And learning about what I know the military did to me kind of sounds like a bad thing, but really what the military did to me, right? Like who this person was, how they shaped him, and when I got out, it still is a part of who I am, and learning those things really is taking a lifetime of being okay. Because I thought when they talked about transition, it was going to be like, oh, I get out, I get my little pay, I get my moving pay, and I'm just like I was, 4 years before I went in. Like I can just step back into my own civilian, old civilian civies, and it'll just be the same. And it wasn't. And part of the hard part, I think, was realizing that it wasn't. I think if I would have known, if somebody would have talked to me earlier about, look, you're a different person now. This is fine. You're going to be great, but accepting that this is the new normal. And you're not going to shed this kind of military thing. Like, you're not going to just take off your uniform and that's it. The Staff Sergeant Larson is always going to be part of kind of who you are. Mm-hmm. I think that's the hard thing that nobody talks to you about. Mm-hmm. And it takes a long time to kind of get to that point of figuring that out. Like you go around going, what the hell's wrong with me? Because I'm not a civilian, and they're expecting me to act like a civilian, but I'm not. And so I'm this odd duck, and being and telling people it's okay because you are a veteran, and that's fine and it's cool. But there's certain cool school subsets of that you're going to be able to use. There's also, like Lori said, if you have combat experience or other experiences, there's some stuff you're going to have to deal with too, and kind of unlearn some of those, or at least learn how to live with them. But help. I always think, going back to Dr. Montgomery's question, I always think of care both inside the military as an officer. I mean, the best officers I worked with were the people, who just gave a crap about you, right? Who really cared about you as an individual, who would talk to you as a person rather than as a rank.
Yeah.
Those are those are also for officer wise, those are the people I would walk through fire for.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew several colonels that, you know, yeah, you do whatever. Yeah. Okay, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. I knew other ones who were like, you know, captains or even lieutenants. I knew a first lieutenant I would have walked through fire for. Most of them were worth their salt, but this guy cared about you, was cool, knew his stuff, and listened. And I would have done anything for that.
There's a thing about leadership we learn in the military. It has two components. People don't realize this. Everybody goes, oh, leadership, sure, you're in charge, you're the boss, you're the supervisor, you're telling people what to do. That is a component of leadership. The other component of leadership is the discipline to follow orders. So you're valuable to a company because you do what they tell you, and you're valuable to the company if you know what to tell people to do. And you can be in either role, you'll probably be in both at several different times. That's leadership, those two components. You need both. And, you know, then depending on your own style and your own thirst for, I don't know what, adrenaline. Can I close with a story? For me. I started my consulting career in 1989 for my own company. Very successful the first year. Second year, all the budgets dry up. But I'm invited to the office of the president of General Motors for 3 years, three-week gig. And so I do this work for 3 weeks, and on my last day, I'm meeting in the president's conference room, big conference room, about 15 other people around the table, talking about the company's problems, and all their answers were, "Oh yeah, we know about that. We've got it handled. We know about that. We've got it handled." I could see the president was very frustrated because he didn't know about this, and he doesn't believe it's handled. So at the end of the meeting, he's very gracious, he's very cordial, he's standing by the door and he's shaking hands with everybody as they file out of the conference room. I arranged to be last. And when the guy ahead of me leaves, I slam the door. I'm still in there with the president. And I said, "How much time do you think you've got?" And he about jumps out of his shoes. That resulted in a 10-year multi-million-dollar contract for me. Right? You take the chance. The man needed help. He was not getting it from his own people. Hey, I've been to Vietnam. I ain't afraid. And I can figure out what we're going to do. I'm going to adapt. I'm going to improvise. I'm going to overcome. We did 17 vehicle programs under the work I was doing that made a fortune for General Motors and saved the company.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you were saying, Bill, real quick, to future officers. Trust realistic people.
Oh, yeah.
They got the experience. I was the flight chief for the F-117 Starfighter propulsion system in Howard Air Force Base. And I've been working in engines for 15 years, right? Different types of engines. But anyway, I remember getting a captain who came in. Now he's in charge, right? I don't know if he could spell engine, right? or knew what was inside the engine, but he was in charge. And I remember having a conversation to him respectfully. I'll push the train down the track. I just need you to get on the board this route, right? Because enlisted people in this building will make sure you get where you need to be, right? Because you have to trust our experience. And we have airmen that's gone through tech school who really know how to do the work they're doing. That's what the Air Force trainers and teachers do, right? But, you know, I think for him, it was, I'm in charge. So now I want to change things. And no, you don't have to change it, right? We will take care of you. So I would say to our young lieutenants, trust your enlisted people, right? Because they've been doing it a while and they'll get you where you need to be. And I think that was the kind of issue, and we're getting to Vietnam, where there was a disparity between the enlisted and the officer, right? There was no trust. Just trust, right? And for civilians, trust your veterans.
Yeah.
Because they bring a wealth of experience to the workforce.
The best officers out of Vietnam, all the way up to colonel, because I've had these conversations, I would say, you do what your sergeant tells you. And they would say, these officers, damned right.
Yeah, and so that's what I would say, you know, on both sides, as an officer and as a civilian, trust, right? And what I've also heard was, my father served, so I know. No, you don't. Your father understands, or your person that you serve. You can't, you know, you don't get that back, right? that my parents served or my dad served, it's a different situation, right? So I would just say, ask them, in the force, what type of job or what type of responsibility, what they like to have, right? Because again, they're going from a place, depending on where you stand, of a place of leadership, and you have to start all over again. And that's a transition in itself. So it's just about trust and respect, and you'll get that in return. So
Well
that's
said.
it. And believe me, you'll have a long Air Force
history.
career if you do that.
Good history. Yeah.
You'll have a long and the enlisted people, as you said, walking fire.
Yep.
That captain became a dear friend of mine. We keep in touch today. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for him. And I made sure that I had 30 people that I was responsible for in that organization. And we all understood that he was the leader.
Yep.
But it was our job to make sure that, we kept him, right? And it was his job to support us in the air cover. So that's how it works.
So for everybody joining us online, I know we ran a little bit over time. I thank you for your time today. We're going to end the webcast right now. Remember that there are more of these coming up throughout the week. So it's vets.umich.edu and Vets Week, Veterans Week. Either one of those things will get you in, and all of our Zoom links are there. So please join us for the rest of the week when you can. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it, and have a good day.
Thank you.